Well, the great salami Subway sandwich saga has finally come to an end, and with it, one of the strangest courtroom stories in recent memory. What started as a bizarre act of protest has now turned into a powerful example of how juries still know the difference between justice and absurdity. Here's what happened. Shawn Dunn, a former paralegal for the Department of Justice, stood trial in Washington, D.C. after throwing, yes, a neatly wrapped salami Subway sandwich at a Customs and Border Patrol officer. The sandwich, loaded with onions and mustard, was tossed during a heated exchange. Federal prosecutors wanted to make a criminal case out of it. But after only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a clear verdict. Not guilty. Now, here's where things get interesting. During deliberations, the jury reportedly munched on sandwiches themselves, adding a little irony to the moment. Dunn's attorney, Julia Gatto, delivered what many are calling one of the best courtroom closings in years. She looked the jury in the eye and said, "He did it. He threw the sandwich. And now the government wants to make a federal criminal case out of it." That was it. Simple, bold, and devastating to the prosecution's argument. The U.S. Attorney's office tried to frame the sandwich toss as a felony assault on a federal officer, which could have carried serious penalties. But the grand jury refused to indict. Even after that, prosecutors insisted on pursuing a misdemeanor trial, an act many in the legal community called petty and politically driven. During testimony, the officer claimed that the sandwich exploded on his chest, onions, mustard, and all, describing it like an act of aggression. But when Dunn's defense team showed photos of the scene, the story began to fall apart. The sandwich was still wrapped, intact, lying neatly on the ground. In other words, the only thing that exploded was the government's credibility. This case might sound comedic, but it points to something much deeper. It highlights how the Department of Justice has been losing the trust of both juries and judges. Over the past several months, juries have increasingly rejected the government's more extreme cases, especially when the evidence feels exaggerated or politically motivated. And this wasn't an isolated incident. In Chicago, Judge Ellis ruled that a Border Patrol official had lied under oath, calling it perjury in open court. She even suggested that the DOJ had suborned perjury, meaning they knowingly allowed false testimony to go unchallenged. That's a serious accusation that shakes the foundation of justice itself. Meanwhile, in the Dunn case, the officer's exaggerated testimony about being covered in mustard became almost symbolic, not of violence, but of how far the system has drifted from fairness. The jury saw through it immediately. They could tell something didn't add up. And as any experienced trial attorney will tell you, a jury can sense dishonesty from a mile away. When the verdict came down, Dunn thanked his legal team and supporters, saying he was grateful that justice prevailed even in difficult times. He also reminded everyone of the core American ideal engraved on the Great Seal of the United States. A pluribus unum, from many, one. His message was simple. Every person deserves dignity, no matter where they come from or who they are. But this story doesn't stop with one sandwich. It's part of a much larger pattern. Across the country, judges and juries are pushing back against overreach, demanding integrity from law enforcement, and insisting that truth still matters in a courtroom. When agencies lie under oath or stretch the law to make examples out of citizens, they lose credibility. And once that trust is gone, the entire system begins to crumble. Think about it. At a time when the country faces real crises, resources are being spent prosecuting a man for tossing a wrapped sandwich. Not an act of violence, not a threat. Just a moment of frustration turned into a federal case. It's a sharp reminder that when the justice system loses perspective, the people, through the jury, still have the power to correct it. As the dust settles, this week will likely be remembered as a turning point. Not just for Shawn Dunn, but for the broader question of fairness in federal prosecutions. Several judges across the nation have issued rulings reinforcing constitutional limits on government power. From Rhode Island to Oregon, from Illinois to Pennsylvania, the judiciary has been reminding the executive branch, the rule of law is not optional. And while this case might have started as a joke about a salami sandwich, it ended as something far more significant. A symbol that the system, however imperfect, still works when everyday citizens sit in that jury box and demand honesty. The message from this trial is crystal clear. Justice is not about politics. It's about truth. And this week, truth won, wrapped neatly with onions and mustard on the side.